Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. As you can see, I have with me someone who knows Kashmir and the J&K region like the back of his hand. Someone who served there as a co-commander, if I may, during the worst times of the area. Lieutenant General Satish Dua. Sir, thank you so much for coming to the show and helping us to understand, is this a new game which is starting up in J&K with what we see in Rajouri? Firstly, sir, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adi. It's nice to be here with you again, and wish you and all the viewers a very happy and a healthy New Year.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Rajouri, and I think it started with that Jammu, that highway violence which took place. It's a little significant because of the region that where this thing happened. How do you look at it, sir?
Um, you see, back in the days when I was a corps commander, the anyone would have said the conventional wisdom would have been, well, it is winters now, the passes are closing, and the because of snowfall, and as it is becoming difficult to operate or infiltrate in the Kashmir Valley, therefore the south of Pir Panjal, that is Jammu region, has to be activated, and then we've had these two incidents, and this is what anyone would have commented about it. But today, I think it's more than just snow on the higher reaches issue. What has happened now and what has changed now is that as of last 3 years, ever since there has been this abrogation of Article 370, the union territory is being administered by the central government uh, through the lieutenant governor. Ever since then, there has been a lot of development. Development activities are being prosecuted. There is a good outreach. The panchayats have been rejuvenated. So is the district councils. Then business is going on as usual. There are business is flourishing, whether it is to do with tourism or handicraft or fruits, everything. Business is flourishing. Bigger business is about to show on the cusp of showing results, where a lot of investments have poured in, but that takes a little long gestation period. The biggest thing is that markets are open every day. There are no hartals, no bans. Schools are running normally. So there is a move or a feeling of moving towards normalcy.
Hmm.
That is something which, in my opinion, is not acceptable to the other side. How do the terrorist groups, their handlers, the other separatists, stakeholders, how do they justify it to their own constituency? And that is the reason why they want to instill fear in the minds of the people as against this feel good factor of normalcy. And to instill that fear, and that is why you see, even before these Jammu region incidents, there have been killings of migrant labor, some Kashmiri pandits, soft targets, teachers in a school, things like that. So, to my mind, it is to upset this feeling of normalcy or moving towards normalcy, and to instill fear in the minds of people that such incidents are being planned and perpetrated.
What is the, I mean, I'm sure you have your sources and you have your contacts within the place, sir, but what is the general feeling when issues like this happen within the region? What is the kind of uh, the feedback that comes from that entire area, sir? Because there are not many areas which are troubled. Is that small little Jammu region, the small little Kashmir, the two three districts which have these issues? What is it that you're hearing from that place with regards to their feeling about what's happening?
No, firstly, there is outrage. There is outrage regarding killings at large,
Hmm.
but specifically when it starts getting to be done around the community lines, it throws in a different angle, and there is a very it requires a different dynamics. But as to your saying, I don't really agree with you saying that there are some pockets which are trouble spots or worse to that effect that you said just now. The point is there is a there is a huge percentage of Muslim population in the Jammu region as well.
True, sir.
In Rajouri district, for example, is Muslim majority, not Hindu majority district. Though in the Rajouri town, uh, perhaps Hindus are evenly matched or more. I am not bringing out these figures to bringing any community angle to the discussion. I am talking about the fact that that is where, if terrorists strike or transit through, they can find pockets of uh, support for them to subsist, or to or a network of their own, and that is why they can actually activate any area. I have operated extensively for years in Punch and Rajouri areas. Now, in those areas, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the terrorist activities, terrorist violence was much more than it was in the valley during a decade or so. So the point I'm trying to make, if they wish to, any such area can be activated, and what can we do about that? That is the question. So, to my mind, security forces, be it the army, the Rashtriya Rifles, the police, the CRPF, and more, the security forces cannot be strung along every meter
Mm.
of the LC, and cannot be available or cannot be sort of deployed in every square inch of the hinterland. We also need uh, an all of government approach, an all of state approach. So we also need to strengthen the civil society.
Hmm.
Though, whenever I've said this in panel discussions on this subject, everyone straight away jumps to the fact, oh, we must have rejuvenate the VDCs, the village defense committees. No, I'm not talking only about that. That's a small tactical measure. But if you see today, the hybrid terrorist, the new term that has come to fore in the last couple of years, is a terrorist who does not have any formal training. He is radicalized, a young man who lives in the society. He does one odd act of terrorist violence and thereafter merges into society. And that's why
Hmm.
it's not easy to sort of nab him.
Trees.
He's
Hmm.
not on the list of the terrorist hit list of the security forces. So what happens is that, who can identify them? The society can. The society knows. There are people within the society who would know who's doing it. So the civil society has to be strengthened. If you take look to the examples of Punjab or Mizoram, we could sort out the issue of terrorism, those terrorist movements in those states, largely towards the end by the help of the civil society. So I think it's a very complex thing to just be read in black and white,
Hmm.
or it is security forces versus terrorists. There are many more stakeholders at play, and there is a very complex dynamics that is set out.
So, so before I go into the Pakistan angle of it, but there is also a thought process about the Deobandi sect of Islam kind of getting activated post, uh, if I may, the rejuvenation of the Taliban in Afghanistan. So I'm not saying that there is direct support, but there's of course that influence which is kind of, that motivating factor that has kind of come out. Would you agree to something like that, sir?
Um, to my mind, that is not so much of a worry.
Sir.
There, sure, there will be an odd element, there will be a fringe element which will be so affected, because when you look at Taliban angle, or you look at IS, as people talk of IS footprint in Kashmir, um, the the separatists and the terrorists, in Kashmir, remember, are also competing for them also. It is the same pool from which they are competing for recruitment, and they are in Kashmir. To my mind, they don't have those ideas of a caliphate. They are just looking. It is a political problem. They're looking for uh, political freedom, whether to align with Pakistan or whether to. They've lost their moorings, of course, but those were the way they started off with. But yes, that's the way I see it. I don't see that as that big a problem as it is being made out.
So there was a recent operations conducted by the security forces have reportedly taken out some very big chaps who were controlling a lot of the logistics of the operations within Kashmir. The Jammu attack, which was actually prevented, was reportedly, took out the Hizbul Mujahideen, some of the biggest commanders in the region. Of course, the details and stuff like that are obviously kept a little distinct. Some people actually believe these attacks in Rajouri and the first attack in Rajouri, not the second one, of course, is a retaliation for that. And the more closer we get to the networks controlling these operations within Kashmir, the more desperation in terms of these soft targets, as you mentioned, would come into further focus. So, is this a hypothesis that you would agree to, sir?
Well, that will always remain a cat and mouse game.
Hmm.
Our intelligence agencies and our security forces, put together or sometimes independently, will have to uh, run such operations where we go after the big fish, and not all of it is in kinetic manner. So a lot of things are taking place, a lot of activities are taking place behind the scenes. We cannot even discuss this in open domain, even if I knew it. But yes, such things always fetch dividends, and they must be attempted, and they are being attempted. There is a risk of retaliation from the other side, as you suggested, but that's a risk we must run, and that is where I say that we must integrate all stakeholders. Today, I'm talking of civil society. Already, grassroots empowerment, the political process of grassroots empowerment has taken place of panchayats and the district development councils. Soon, there will be a political process that will come up at the state level, where there will be more stakeholders. So, all stakeholders must be integrated in this fight against terrorism.
Interesting. And you spoke about the village, armed this thing. I think the
Development
first,
council.
yeah, the first retaliation towards the first attack was done by a armed villager. So that's
Yes.
very interesting, and that tells you that the groundswell of support for these guys that we saw at one time is not present there. Coming to Pakistan, sir, it's got a lot on its platter, but it's in spite of having a lot on its platter, it's not going to forget what the game is within Kashmir. Because that's like I think it's a very well-oiled machine for it. वो चलता रहता है. ISI ये वो सब कुछ it's just on. Some questions which come up with regards to the capability of Pakistan to even control what is happening arise. Looking at their own focus towards the western part of their borders. Sir. How do you see this?
Well, today, Pakistan is in an unenviable spot. Uh, you see, on one hand, uh, their own writ or influence um, in this part of the world is shrinking. Ever since Article 370 was abrogated, it's been 3.5 years, and the way the security grid has been tightened, as the number of terrorists, the infiltration as well as number of terrorists operating in the hinterland are less. Uh, that normalcy factor that I spoke about, their influence is shrinking. On the other hand, on their western borders, their troubles are mounting. They thought that they are going to gain strategic space in Afghanistan. It is somehow happening other way around. They are having to concede space in the Pashtun areas. So they are not in a happy place. We know the kind of statements that are going on between at a ministerial level between Pakistan and Afghanistan on the attack on Taliban camps inside Afghanistan. Afghanistan says reminds them of the surrender ceremony of 1971 against India. So I'll not get into that. We all have been seeing that in the news. So Pakistan is in troubled on both borders. It is not in a happy place on either sides. In between, domestically, Pakistan is in economic doldrums, to say the least. It is politically in a very at a very weak spot at the moment. Diplomatically, it is not in a happy situation because uh, even the US is now not giving that kind of attention to Pakistan as it did. Uh, China is also calling for its own dues. So all in all, Pakistan is in a bad spot, but that is not to say that they are going to give up this mission of theirs anytime soon. Because to my mind, it takes little to continue this, in the sense that in terms of investment they've already have their networks and their grids. It is not as if they have to run the operations themselves. They just give a loose direction. They give some money, uh, financial and ideological support. Certainly we are seeing in the over the last 2 days the kind of social media warfare they are indulging in this regard. So to that extent they will continue this, and they need to continue this besides other reasons. If they don't, they have so many, they already have are being bitten by terror themselves, and they would have so many more terrorists if they are not inside their own country, if they are not focused against cross border against India, against Jammu and Kashmir. They will come back to bite them. So I think we are not seeing their, their interest declining, their influence is waning, and I think this is the time we must grab the moment to upturn the tables, as is surely and steadily happening in Jammu and Kashmir.
That's interesting. You actually bring about a factor that a lot many people won't know about, the factor that all these things are sort of in auto mode today. As you say, it's an automatic transition that takes place between Pakistan and these nefarious organizations which actually operate. Uh, the monetary systems are set up and everything like that. Today, do you think the ISI would be controlling the way it used to, or their influence within these organizations would be also waning to a large extent, sir?
uh, I don't think their influence within these organizations is winning, because these organizations, where else are they getting their funds from? They get their funds from them only.
Hmm.
In fact, if anything, although that was also indirectly through Pakistan or ISI, um there was another power center, and that was the separatists. The separatists in Kashmir have been marginalized. Their own properties are being attached. NIA has gone after them in a very big way and in a very methodical manner. They have been whittled down. Uh, Sayyid Ali Shah Jilani is no more. So the, that power center has been largely marginalized, and so, to that extent, it is only the ISI and Pakistan whose influence runs large in these organizations. When I said their influence is waning, is in the overall scheme of things
Hmm. Hmm.
in the terrorist violence that they are able to perpetrate in Jammu and Kashmir. But within the organizations, I think ISI still controls them. And at the expense of reputation, I'll end by saying they don't have to control day-to-day activities. They give them a large direction, a sense of direction, and what is to be done as was being done earlier.
The most important thing that you actually bring about is the factor that ISI has a certain charter for these guys and they kind of follow that thing. Now, so over the years, with the army itself in Pakistan, kind of, I won't say breaking apart. That's a very wild term to use, but having a certain amount of differences. The ISI today has to focus a lot within Pakistan to keep their game going on. These organizations would become more and more independent. Is that something that you would fear? Because not fear, but you would worry about, because the more independence these guys get, they won't really bother about the status of Pakistan as per se when they conduct these operations. ISI would know, यार ये red line है इसको नहीं cross करना, because if you do, then world community will get after you. These organizations, as they get a little further independent, when they are just okay, yaar karo 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 karo, do you worry about a certain escalatory matrix that might just come up because there's no one to control them?
In my opinion, Adi, we we tend to make too much of what should I say, some marginalization of fissures within the Pakistan army.
Hmm.
We'd like that to happen, perhaps. We start seeing more than we should see. This is my opinion. That Pakistan army is a very professional army. Let's not talk about the fact of the business empire that they've built up and the cloud that they run in the country. No, that's besides the point. To our discussion, in our uh, from our discussion point of view, Pakistan army. Let us admit that it is a professional army. It's one of the strengths that Pakistan has that is holding the country together. And to my mind, there are not too many such fissures. Yes, there is an element of Pakistan army which is more radicalized. There is ISI, which it is. We all carry the impression that it has got its own fiefdom, but it is not as if the ISI does not listen to the Pakistan army chief or something like that. I think we magnify such thoughts because we perhaps want it to be that way. So I don't think that that is going to give us much joy. The question that you're posing,
Hmm.
I think Pakistan Army and ISI are well within their place. True, ISI, as its name suggests, it is inter-services intelligence. It is technically not does not belong only to Pakistan Army. We have a DGDIA. Quite often, we complain against each other when within our own intelligence organizations they don't keep us informed of everything and things like that. So, too much should not be read into such rumblings that we hear.
Hmm. Indeed, sir. Coming back to the region, we will notice now, going forward, basically, as we've discussed these targeted killings before as well, and for some time they were at a height. Some stuff was done and they kind of calmed down. Then we've had these spate of two, three of them, which kind of keep the fire or keep the oil in the fire, to keep the flames up. Is this going to be the phase of operations that we will see, that every time there is pressure, there's going to be softer targets picked up and tucked, something would be done in a place where the as you said, they would be able to get some sort of support, I won't say, but some sort of a foothold uh, 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 to carry out these kind of operations. So is this a new phase of tactics that we're going to see from these terrorist organizations going forward, rather than those mass attacks and those hits on the convoys, hits on the security forces and stuff like that, sir? These are more impactful on the media. So is a new phase of operations, sir?
Uh, you're right that it is easier for them to conduct such operations, to prosecute such operations. The terrorist strikes on soft targets is easier than trying to strike a security forces convoy or a security forces camp.
Hmm.
But let's also remember, while it's easier to do this, the more civilians are targeted, They also tend, that is, the terrorist groups also then tend to lose out support the from the civil awam, from the civil population. Now, the a terrorist or a terrorist organization also subsists on the support of the populace at large. When they go and melt into the crowd in the villages, they know that they have a network inside there that shelters them. What I'm trying to say, that it's a very a tightrope walk, that easier to target, but then in the long run, it will not be good for the terrorist organizations. But a stage has come that they are pushed to such things. Their
Hmm.
security grid is tightening around them. So we are likely to see more of such things, no doubt. But I don't think the magnitude. You see, the magnitude will be so much, or as you tend to as we tend to imagine that this is an easy target, so they will see many more of this. I just gave you the reason why we won't see so much more of it. In fact, to my mind, Pakistan against India, expanding even beyond, they would like to carry the area forward or southwards. South of Pir Panjal area has been activated. To my mind, and I remember reading, there was a report by IB many years ago when I was a corps commander, saying that the death by thousand cuts is being replaced by death by thousand revolts. That means Pakistan would actually try to support many such revolts. And if you take your mind to it, in the couple of years, even during the COVID years, we've had so many agitations. A lot of them turned violent or turned persistent, inexplicably. So, are we seeing a foreign hand in all these? So maybe time will tell, and then the intelligence will unfold that. So I think we are in for different kind of tactics, because the tactics that we have been seeing over the last few years is certainly not going to be able to work in J&K, and more so in the Kashmir Valley.
That's a very interesting thing. So as a matter of fact, you know, there is a security organization called INEU, INNEU, which did a survey about the tweets that went out before the farmers' protest. 11,000 Twitter accounts were created, which tweeted about 2 million tweets in support of the entire movement, and bringing in that negative agenda into a protest that probably didn't start with that particular agenda, and created this whole hawa, which took off and resulted in what happened in Delhi after that. And funnily speaking, these so this agency kept these accounts under track, and they realized when Imran Khan got into trouble in Pakistan, they all changed their names and switched focus, and they started tweeting on Imran Khan PTI.
Yes.
So it's probably an army on sale, if I may, which is doing all this stuff. And you're very very right, and it's something that we need to look at. Sir, I have two more questions for you. One is about, you mentioned about the civil society itself and the acceptance levels within that fringe that used to support, or that would be forced to support these kind of incidents. The issue that a lot of people don't realize, and please throw some light on it, is the factor that a lot of times when local support is given to these terrorists, it's also under the barrel of the gun, and it's also under cohesion sometimes, where people are, forced to kind of do certain things. How do you think that civil society will change over time, and as money and as prosperity starts going through Kashmir, people are going to say, यार उधर से तो पैसे आते थे, ठीक है आते थे, यहाँ से और आ रहे मेरे को, मैं क्यों घुसूं इन चीजों के अंदर?
uh, you've actually hit the nail on the head. Civil society, I mean, civil society is a good word. It is you and me living
जी.
in societies, in villages, in colonies. Um they are scared. They are scared for their life. If they help the security forces, if they give up a terrorist, that tomorrow somebody will come and harm them, their family or friends. But Having said that, I also said that I gave you example of two other states, Punjab and Mizoram, where uh, if you want peace for your future generations, there will be a price to pay. And like you yourself said, today a young man, he sees that uh, business is running as usual. A lot of tourists is pouring in, a lot of investment is coming in in another couple of years, those small to medium sized industrial units that are being set up with, with domestic and foreign investment will start showing results. When a young man or a young woman starts to see this, they will not want this disrupted. Let me put it this way: for about 30 years, the population in J&K had to put up with a lot of deprivations, hardships, because wherever security forces operations were conducted, they had to be moved out of their houses. There was checking, and at every checkpost there would be so many checks. They would get delayed for whatever timelines they had to keep. People would get delayed, so they had to put up a lot of deprivations, even those not directly in line of fire.
Yeah.
But today, so people, there was disgruntlement, there were anger against terrorists, there was disgruntlement against security forces also, because that was the prevailing atmosphere. What is the prevailing atmosphere? So the children who were born in that era were always disgruntled. You could never convince them of that good times would come. Today, over the last 3 years, someone a teenager who's now growing up, and he or she sees that there is prosperity, there is development, there is business as usual, whether it is shops or schools. Then malls are opening, cinemas opening, uh, fast food chains are setting up outlets. So the world that they saw through internet is actually opening up in their streets, in their towns and villages. So the moment this sort of thing happens, and if it'll be sustained, when it is sustained, I think the younger generation will not want to get into that, will not want to support anyone supporting terrorism. They will actually perhaps question their elders also, as to why should we go that way, why not this way, because this is the life we want to lead. And so you we are not only showing them a dream, we are making them realize their dream. And I think this is how the state will be able to bring about a change. When I say state, I mean the center and the state, everything put together, will be able to bring about a change in the mindset of this civil society, and I think it is much needed.
Absolutely, sir. And that's something which I personally believe that with the kind of work which is happening there, people realize, yeah, if I need to earn money, let me do it the
Yes.
right way. I mean, why get into all this nonsense? Somebody catches me after that, I'll be stuck for the rest of my life with some security force somewhere in some black room without realizing when I'm going to come out. Here is a place where I can work in a McDonald's or a Burger King and earn the same amount of money decently and live my life happily. You know, this
Not only McDonald
I'm just
and a
saying, it's
burger.
just a
No,
figure of speech.
I'm saying not only in those businesses from outside, their own fruit industry. There is
Own
such a
fruit
lot of
industry, yes.
potential, and
Hmm.
with investment coming in, their own fruit industry. The fruit used to rot because if there is one day's hartal, crores and crores worth of fruit would just rot on loaded in trucks because the trucks couldn't move. So the fruit industry has a very short shelf life. Apart from that, there was no value addition to fruit. There is no canning, making. There is no preservation, fruit preservation. Fruit industry wasn't there, processing industry. So much is now happening that they will get more bang for the buck, more value for their money, uh, while following the right path.
Yeah, that's I think a very very interesting change. We all expected something to change within the society, but the society needs to be given an incentive to change. So that's I think happening. So my last question. Now we've seen a change in Kashmir in terms of the operations from the terrorist side. Now I'm just requesting you because you've been there, you've commanded that region, you've served in that region. Uh, so I'm sure you have a fair idea of how these guys think. The first target was destabilization, infiltration, creating hangama within the place, which is what happened in history. Then it was like an all-out battle between the security forces and these terrorists. We used to hear of ambushes, which we don't,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, today. We used to hear of ambushes. We used to hear of security forces stuck, and a lot of incidents, a lot of deaths, and this and that. That, of course, didn't really work out. Today, they've come up with these soft targets, which, as you say, there is it's a two-way street. So the more you push the soft target, the more you're gonna lose.
Yes.
What is the next phase, sir?
I think security forces are going to be able to consolidate and be able to marginalize the terrorists by not only nabbing the terrorists at work, but also by strangulating their OGW network, the Overground Workers Network. The NIA is doing a great job of, you know, uh, s- getting after the fund flow. Everything needs money. There is, if ISI is willing to give money, there are certain channels. Eventually, it comes through some, whether it's a Hawala racket. For example, if you recall, when demonetization took place, and let's not talk about demonetization, let's not get into that discussion. But the fact remains, when demonetization took place, it made an immediate impact on the stone pelting, because stone pelting was 500 rupee note given for 1 day of stone pelting, and suddenly that thing stopped because those notes were no longer in circulation. So similarly, that was at a tactical level. Fund flows are being caught. OGW networks are being strangulated. The security forces themselves are putting out a very robust counter infiltration grid at the LC, and in the hinterland, the security forces have a very strong counter infiltration network. So with all these things put together, we are able to, and we have seen over the past 3 years how the number of the residual terrorists has dropped within the Kashmir Valley. The number of incidents, terrorist violence incidents, have dropped. How recruitment into terrorism ranks of into terrorist groups has dropped. So with all this is happening on one side, on the other side, as we discussed, you see the fruits of the spoil, you see the fruits of normalcy, you see business growing, a feel good factor of everything back to normal. uh, I think this is the way I see that going forward. We will be able to increase the positives and be able to control the negatives that the terrorists seek to rake on the populace.
I think that's a very good roundup, sir. And I request you to kind of just take a last minute. And I'm sorry I said the last, but I'm going to ask you the last one more time,
Never mind.
because you mentioned about the fund flow, and I personally would like to just reframe this and hope for your comment on it. Uh, we want to now go after the disease rather than the symptoms,
Yeah.
and that, to me, is a larger game, which will obviously take time, sir. It's not something, this is something that has been established over 30, 40 years. It's not something that can go off in 2, 3. So what, from someone who's served in that place, who's been a part of the game that was being played, and who's been a part of the security establishment in that place, who pushed back, how do you see, how would you like to actually put a message across to the country, which says that, guys, time though? Because when I say it, it doesn't make much of an impact, but coming from someone like you, it will tell people that, yeah, there is, of course, you've said a lot, but how would you like to kind of put this thing across as a last closing note, sir?
um, I would feel that the way we are seeing things improving over the last 3 years, we are going to see more of that. As I said earlier, we when in an all of nation approach and a whole of government approach, when we have the intelligence agencies doing what we just now spoke about, we have the security forces making sure that the violence levels are low. We see uh, the economy uh, looking up right now, but maybe another 3 4 years we'll say it is booming. And most importantly, something that it did not come about in our discussion, I think, as we can see the political process unrolling now that the delimitation process
Yeah.
is completed, and as soon as is possible, when we have a political process in the state, and then hopefully also restoration of JNK to statehood, with all this done, there will be, when the political representatives are there, the government, there is a government in a state which is looking up economically, and even the violence levels are low. If the state is governed by, they are governing the state themselves, it'll make a lot of difference. And I think that is the step we are looking at. The moment that happens, we will be able to bring down the terrorist violence to, I should not, I mean, clinically speaking, I would say below a minimum acceptable threshold. When I say that, what I mean is it'll perhaps not be zero anytime soon.
Mm,
Today, you take Punjab. Punjab is normal, there's normalcy. But, I mean, do you think, don't we see off and on some incident, some
mm,
chutput
mm,
incident here
mm,
or there,
mm.
or some news come over here or there? So that kind of thing might remain. If that remains, I think we've achieved our victory. We've achieved normalcy
That's
in
normal
JNK.
life. I mean, that's normal
Yes,
life. If I may, silly things happen all over the country and all over the world. I mean, for that matter.
yes,
So there are these silly fringe elements which will try and do something here and there for their own agenda. That'll always be there. But generally speaking, I think you've hit the nail right on the mark when you actually say that it's the minute they start governing and owning their own area, a lot more will change because then it will be their responsibility to
yes.
ensure peace and normalcy and stuff like that. Of course, hidden agendas and stuff like that would be needed to be kept away,
True.
and a whole lot of things need to be done. So it's always an eye opener talking to you. Let me assure you, because when you listen to the doomsday scenario that has been put out in the media, and that's something that we really wonder when we hear the same rhetoric again and again. As you opened the discussion by saying, winter hai to abhi Pir Panjal range operational hai, summer hoga to it will be there in Kashmir. This is something that we've been hearing, and you brought about a very, very different aspect towards this whole thing. Thank you so much for that. So it's always a learning experience talking to you. I'd like to repeat something which is stuck to me, which you said in the last show that we did. And I asked you a question with regards to, sir, hasn't this whole political process taken too much time? And you said, Adi, with comparison to
Compared
what?
to what? Yeah.
And that stuck to me. And I just want to close the show by, putting that thing across. Thank you so much, sir, as usual, for coming across and sharing your viewpoint and your wonderful insights into the whole situation. Till next time, sir, for another subject. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you for inviting me. It was nice discussing this topic with you, as always. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir.